In the fall of 1998, I fell in love with the guitar. And 1998, I'm only 37, so I graduated high school in 98. I started my freshman year of college, and I grew up a musician, grew up playing piano, but by the time I was 11, I'd kind of migrated my affections towards the guitar and have done it ever since. Did it for as a profession for a long time, was a worship pastor at different churches, was the worship pastor here for 9 years, and still love music. It's a huge part of my life. But I had a particular focus. It's just the nerd like anointing that I have. I just love acoustic, handmade, high quality acoustic instruments. And so as a late middle schooler, early high schooler, this is before the prevalence of the internet, I would find these boutique luthier shops, guys that make handmade acoustic instruments that are typically thousands of dollars. I could not afford any of them, but I would call them and I would ask them to send me catalogs of their instruments. And I literally had catalogs stacked in my room, and I would take out pictures and hang them on my wall. So while other people had Poison or Nirvana or like rock band posters, I had like acoustic guitars, you know what I'm saying? So I didn't have a lot of friends. And so with that, it was just a passion of mine. My dad raised me to be kind of a folky. I was kind of a nouveau beatnik, kind of behind my generation in a lot of ways with music. So I found in our city there was one music store that carried handmade acoustic instruments. There was only one in the entire area, and I would go there after school 2 or 3 times a week. And after sweet talking the owner several times, because he didn't want me to touch the instruments because they were $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a piece, and he looked me up and down and knew I couldn't buy one. You know what I'm saying? And so but after a while, he realized I was pretty proficient in what I was doing. He would let me play the instruments, and after a while, we built quite a friendship. One afternoon, kind of like the stars aligned. It was kind of a solar eclipse of its own way, like a solar eclipse of the heart. I don't know if I can say that or not, but all the stars lined up, and Tommy, the guy that owned the shop, said, "Nathan, there's a guitar that came in this week that I think you would really like." And I said, "I like all of your guitars, so this is going to be really easy." He said, "No, I know you really like these Breedlove guitars made in the Northwest." And he said, "As a matter of fact, don't you lead worship at your church?" I said, "I do." He says, "Well, this guy that brought the guitar in, he's trading out. He's getting another one like it. He really likes it. He's trying a different model." And he said, he's a worship leader. His name's Daryl Evans. And I was like, now you got to understand, at this point, Daryl Evans had written some very prominent worship songs, "Let the River Flow," "Your Love is Extravagant," "Trading My Sorrows." And these songs were like really shaping my life in worship in this time. And I said, "You've got to be kidding me. That's Daryl Evans' guitar." He's like, "Yeah." So he let me play it, and he said, "Man, I think that'd be a great guitar for you." Well, it was $3,000. And I said, "I think it'd be a great guitar for me as well. Are you giving it away?" No, he kind of laughed at that. And he said, "No, seriously, don't you play at like coffee houses and stuff?" And I said, "I do." He says, "Well, why don't we take a picture of you holding the guitar? You can take it to the different coffee houses, and maybe if you open your case, you can get some money, and you can buy it." Now, can I just be very honest with you? Most of my friends at these coffee houses were bumming nickels to buy lattes. They don't have money to give me towards my, but I think we have that picture. Yep, there it is. So this is 1998. This is me with my Prince socks and my Birkenstocks on. Again, the whole friend issue was a challenge. But 98, this is me with the guitar. And if I'm honest, I took the picture more to appease him than because I was so full of faith that I could actually have it. Does that make sense? So I actually was playing at a coffee shop that night in Mobile, Alabama, where I lived. I go play, and I got like $8 towards my, guitar fund. This was the GoFundMe of the previous generation, right? And so, just $2,992 more to go, and we're seeing a miracle, you know what I'm saying? And so I was like, in my heart, I wanted to believe for it. But the realistic, practical part of me was saying, don't get your hopes up like that. Anybody ever been there before? Right? We're scared to reach. It's kind of like that turtle that won't emerge from the shell. It's like, I dare not reach because I'm so afraid of what the disappointment could be like. Something happened. That was a Friday. Something happened on that Sunday morning. in worship, just worshiping the Lord. I wasn't playing that morning. I'm just a part of the congregation. In the back of my mind was like, I mean, it would be awesome. And it does belong to someone that really impacted my life. God, I would really like it. I could count on my right hand the number of times I've heard God as clearly as I heard him that morning. But he said this to me. He said, Nathan, I am going to give you that guitar, and you're not going to pay one dime. That may sound strange to you. This is not some sort of prosperity thing. I'm just telling you what God told me on a Sunday morning, okay? Matter of fact, I wrote it in my journal, and I think we have that picture as well because I found this. This is my actual journal from when I was 18 years old. I sat down and I wrote it in my journal because I'm telling you, it was a gift of faith moment. I shared it with some friends after church, and that night we had a youth group function. Some people took my baseball hat off and said, hey, man, we're going to raise some money for Nathan to get his guitar. They passed it around the room, and I wish I could tell you they raised all the money. They came up with about $200, okay? Well, 3,000 feels like it might as well be 3 million at this point, you know? But it built my faith, and what my friend said is, Nathan, go down to the music store first thing tomorrow, take the $208 that you have now, and see if you can make a down payment on it, and if they'll hold it for you. I said, that's a great idea. I'm going to do it in faith. Monday came. I had morning classes. I could not get out of there fast enough. I was so excited. God had given me this word. I was holding on to it. I really had a gift of faith. I drive to the music store. I walk in. I see Tommy. I say, Tommy, he's the shop owner. You're not going to believe this. I just really feel like that guitar is for me. Tell him the story. God gave me a word. He's not a believer. He doesn't know. I'm just super excited. You know, I just got to tell. And so I'm sharing with him. I tell him about the $200, and I ask, can I put some money down on it so that I can tie it up? And he just looks like he's going to throw up. He says, I don't even know what to say to you. That guitar sold this morning. And I looked up on the wall, and there was a hole where that guitar had been sitting the entire time. Every time I'd gone there, and it was gone. And I'm telling you, it was like absolute morning fear, feeling silly. It all started to creep. Anybody been there before where you kind of put your faith out there, and then it started trying to come on me? And I'll finish this in a few minutes. If you got your Bibles, let's go to Genesis chapter 17. Genesis 17 is the next chapter. We've been doing a series on the life of Abraham, and my guitar story really does play into all of this. But Genesis 17, last month, Joel Richardson was here. And again, I've got to talk to Scott. The last two times I taught after Dr. Michael Brown, and now I've taught after Joel Richardson. So I'm starting to develop a complex, because these people are just incredible. But I'm so honored for the opportunity. Genesis 16, we talked about Hagar. We talked about Ishmael. We talked about the future promise of Isaac. And incredible teaching. Now we're at a place where finally this is the chapter where God changes Abram's name to Abraham. This is where the covenant of the promise comes in just before we see the emergence of Isaac. And I want to call this message Marked by Righteousness. Because we're going to talk about the covenant of circumcision. It's in there. If you look at the subtitle, that's what the chapter's about. But I want to get a revelation on what this is all about. And the message I've got for us is marked by righteousness. There's three things in Genesis 17 that I want to pull out. And the first principle I want to give you is this. God does it before he does it. Oftentimes, God does it before he does it. Let me explain that. Genesis 17, let's look at verse 4 and 5. As for me, this is my covenant with you. This is God speaking to Abram. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham. This is where he changes his name. I have made you a father of many nations. That's a very key statement right there. You might want to underline, circle, just make a mental note. Genesis 17, verse 5, he says, your name's no longer Abram. Abram means exalted father. Abraham means father of multitudes. He says, I'm now calling you Abraham. I'm changing your social security card. I'm changing your driver's license, changing your checkbook. This is your new name. I have made you a father of many nations. Isaac is still not born. But what did God just say to Abraham? I've already done it. It's not done, but I've already done it. That's what he was saying to him. And it's important that we understand this is how God often works. As a matter of fact, a statement you need to remember is this: it's already done, though you don't yet see it. It's already done, though you don't yet see it. Today, I was on the phone with customer service for our cell phone plan. My card that I used to pay with auto pay the card had expired, and so I needed to put a new one in. I put the new one in. Apparently, it didn't pay the bill, so we were 2 weeks behind, and I get a notice that I have a late fee. And I'm like, how in the world? It's all up to date. So I get the customer service, realize, okay, update it, pay it, and I'm like, is it possible for you to waive that late charge? It was just, I pay it every single month, just the card had expired, and I didn't realize it. They're like, absolutely, click, 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 click. It's all done. So I look at my account, and it still has a late fee on it, And I'm like, can I get like a confirmation number or something to let me know for sure that what you just said is done? If you work in customer service, I love you. I just want you to know right now. But I want to make sure what you just said is done is really done, because what I'm seeing, it's still saying it's not done. Am I tracking with me? And if I'm really honest, I don't want to get off the phone with you saying it's done, and then it's not done. Then I got to call and do this again. Everybody have to do that before, right? We're just being real tonight, right? God bless them, but I'm just telling the truth. And so she's like, sir, I don't know how to explain it to you. It's done. You just don't see it yet. God is saying to Abraham, I've already made you a father of many nations. It's done. You may not see it yet, but it's no less real than, it has already happened. And I think for a lot of us, we get stuck in that place of wanting to grab hold of that promise, that word that God gives me, he's going to give me a guitar, and I'm excited about it, but I don't want to get too excited. Can we be real, right? Can we just tell the truth? Because I don't want to put my faith out there and have what happened to me where I'm standing in front of the guy and I'm all Jesus this and it's going to be amazing. And he's like, oh, about that. I sold it. Abraham had that opportunity. If we look in verse 6, it says, this is God speaking, I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession. If God says it's everlasting, when does it expire? Never. As an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you. In case there was any confusion, it's not just everlasting for Abraham, it's for his descendants after him, and I will be their God. This is what God is saying to Abraham. He's trying to educate him in the ways of faith. He's saying, now that it's done, here is what you should expect. That is faith. Now that it's done, what did he say? I've already made you a father of many nations. He hasn't seen it. It's not manifest. I'm on the other side of the line saying, I want to believe in faith that you just credited that late fee back to me, but I don't see it. It's done, sir. You just don't see it reflected on your end yet. I'm telling you, it's done. And I think this is a word for someone tonight. See, God often says, now that it's done in faith, in prayer, start expecting these other things to follow. That's faith. And what does the writer of Hebrews tell us about faith? Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. It took faith for me to get off the phone with the customer service person and say, okay, thank you so very much. I'm really grateful that it is done, although I don't see it, right? It took faith to see it all the way through. How dare we compare the Lord to a customer service representative? When he says it's done, but we're just like, yeah, right? We're just human, right? There's no condemnation. It's just being real about where we are. If you skip down a few verses in Hebrews 11, it says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. That's faith. It's done, even though I don't yet see it. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because, how was she enabled to bear children at age 90? The writer of Hebrews is telling us right now, because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. I was a little iffy with the customer service representative, if I'm just telling the truth. I didn't consider the one who was telling me as faithful. That's more on me than it is on her. She was probably doing a great job. Too often, we don't consider him faithful, so therefore we are not enabled to receive the thing he's wanting us to receive. Does that make sense? We okay? It's good news tonight. Let's just lay hold of it. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore, because he is faithful and he will do it. I got to Tommy at the music store. The guitar's missing on the wall. I feel that feeling of defeat kind of creeping in while I'm standing there. And listen, I have gotten this wrong 1,000 times. So this is not, hey, listen to me, I'm the man of faith and power that gets it right all the time. I can tell you way more stories where I fold and I cower. But something had happened on that Sunday morning. And I'm telling you, if I hadn't written it in my journal and shared it with some others and really put my faith in it, I don't know if I would have had the strength, but I looked right at him. And I said, I don't know how to explain this, but that guitar is mine. So whenever it comes back, here's my phone number. And I wrote my phone number down, and I gave it to him. I said, just give me a call. And I left. Now, I wish I could tell you I left like speaking in tongues and casting out demons everywhere and full of faith. I think I started crying when I got in the car. You know what I'm saying? So again, man of faith and power. But in that moment, I had boldness to proclaim that thing. Monday goes by, no call. Tuesday goes by, no call. Wednesday goes by, no call. Wednesday night, I'm supposed to lead worship for our student ministry that I was a part of there in Mobile. Got up to the team, we practice our songs, go to pray. I'm looking at my little guitar that I have, and I'm grateful for it at the time, but it just is like a shell of what I was hoping for and believing for. Go back out after prayer to start leading worship, and when I get there, all the strings on my guitar are cut in half. And it's time to start. Now, I am casting out demons at this point. I'm like, what is going on? You know? And so I go to get, I'm looking around, and everyone's kind of looking like they have that thing where they won't look you in the eye, you know? You're like, something is, what have I done? You know, you check your zipper or whatever. You're like, what's weird? And so I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but there's no way I can use this. And somebody in the back of the room says, hey, here's a guitar you could use. And they bring the guitar, the one guitar that I had my heart set on that the Lord told me he was going to give me, with the Indian rosewood back and sides and the bear claw Sitka spruce top and the abalone rosette and all the things that I knew about it that I could not afford, the things that I drooled after for the longest time. And there's no way my parents could buy it for. There's just no way. It was not part of our reality. And they hand me the guitar. And what had happened is that some of those friends that gave me $200 on that night started talking and said, I wonder if we can just put it on layaway for him. So they called on the Monday before I got there, and they had it put in the back. I didn't know that. Well, I don't know that they were planning on buying it for me outright, but apparently when I put my faith out there like I did to Tommy, then they started spreading the word, and people took up an offering and bought the guitar for me. And then I show up, and it was given to me, and I just wept like a baby. Because it wasn't anymore. It wasn't about the guitar. It's just wooden strings. It was about God had spoken something to me, and I wouldn't let it go. Is this encouraging to somebody? I would not let it go. Guys, I've let it go 1,000 times. Can I just be very, very transparent? I didn't on this time, and that's why it's a story worth telling, right? Abram had received a promise, and there's the fragility of it's been spoken, but we haven't realized it yet. Because the enemy will parade evidence in front of us and say, you shouldn't believe that. Right? It'd be like if you went to Chick-fil-A tomorrow, and we see each other, you go at lunchtime. I say it this way. You go to Chick-fil-A at lunchtime, you see my car there. Later that afternoon, you don't see me. Later that evening, you say, hey, Nathan, I saw that you were at Chick-fil-A today. And I say, no, was it? And you're like, yes, you were. I saw your car there. It had the little sticker. You were there. I said, no, it wasn't. And they said, well, I have evidence that you were at Chick-fil-A. The issue is evidence doesn't equal proof. What if I let my friend borrow my car that day to go to lunch and I'm at the office? You still had evidence that I was there. It just wasn't proof that I was there. The enemy will parade evidence in front of us all the time. Well, Nathan, you went to the guitar store and it was gone. The evidence says this thing is done. Oh, it was evidence and it was accurate. It just wasn't proof. Does that make sense? Abram gets a promise, and for 15 years there's no Isaac. And the evidence supported the truth that it wasn't going to happen. But evidence is not the same thing as proof. And when the enemy presents evidence in front of you and says, there's no way, that is not proof. The proof is if he said it, though I don't yet see it. He's done it before he's done it. Amen? Is that encouraging? You receiving that? I hope you will. The second piece is this. God gives us reminders of his faithfulness. Every time I pick this guitar up, most people don't care. I'm going to do my song or whatever. They don't care. I think about, now, not every single time. I don't want to sound like I'm just this like I am super emotional, but not overly emotional, right? But 80% of the time when I pick my guitar up, what I think about is how God did something that I could not do. I think about it. See, God gives us reminders of his faithfulness because, can we be honest? We tend to forget. How quickly God does a miracle in our life, then we're driving home from church. We get cut off in traffic, and we're like, Lord, take me home. I don't even want to live here anymore. I hate everybody. I want to burn everybody's house down, right? We just get so frustrated, like it just happens like that. And so quickly we forget. Man, God doesn't despise us in our weakness, but he does give us reminders. And we may not like this truth, but it still is true. Few things help you remember something better than pain. It's just true. My favorite part about this story isn't getting the guitar. It's the day when I thought all hope was lost. And yet the Lord was still doing a good work. I cried that day. It was painful that day. But it makes me remember the sweetness of what he did. There are times God will allow us in his loving discipline, not as punishment, in his loving discipline, that we'll endure some challenges. Abram and Sarai had to endure 15 years of potential ridicule of, oh, father of many nations, is that right? Where are your kids? Oh, that's right, you don't have any kids. Mockery. 15 years, I bet it was painful. How much sweeter was it on that day when God brought the promise to bear? So though we go through the night, there's joy in the morning. Hosea 6:1 says this, come let us return to the Lord. He's torn us to pieces, but he will heal us. He has injured us, but he will bind up our wounds. In Genesis 17, verse 10 through 13, God gives the covenant of circumcision to Abram, and it's about a reminder of his faithfulness. This is my covenant, verse 10 says, with you and your descendants after you. The covenant you're to keep, every male among you shall be circumcised. You're to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household or bought with your money from a foreigner. Those who are not your offspring, whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant, what was it supposed to be? It was a reminder that I am promising to do something, this is God speaking, and I'm going to bring it to bear. There's very little you can do about it other than trust that what I say is true. Trust that it's done before it's done. And without getting graphic and without getting to a lot of details, what's important for us to remember is that for all of posterity, from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and on, anytime Israelites were intimate together, there was a reminder that the only way we're even able to have a family, the only way any of us are even here, is because God gave a promise to a man who couldn't have children, with a wife who could not have children, and that we are miracles. And every time a mother gave birth to a son, and on the 8th day had to present him, and he was circumcised, it was one more reminder there was pain involved. And listen, if you read the account there in Genesis 17, Abraham was 90 years old when he got circumcised. I imagine that was an unpleasant experience, if you understand what I'm saying. But then again, Sarah had to have a baby at 90, so I guess we're going to call it even. You know what I'm saying? I think that's probably calling it even. But the point is, there was a reminder constantly that God has done this miracle and he's continuing to do it. Here's the third piece as we kind of finish up. The third truth I want us to get from Genesis 17 on this being marked by righteousness is that God affirms righteousness with a sign. He doesn't affirm a sign as righteousness. That might take a second to really grab. But the issue of circumcision became a big deal in the New Testament church as all of the early believers were all Jewish. The church started in Israel, started in Jerusalem. And so all these Jewish believers are beginning to wrestle with the issue that Gentiles are now coming into the kingdom of God through salvation in Jesus, Yeshua the Messiah. And these Gentiles are uncircumcised because circumcision set the Hebrews apart as a covenant people with a covenant God. And so it became an issue of, well, do they need to be circumcised or become Jewish in order to become Christian, to become saved, to have a relationship with Jesus? That became an issue. But what's important that we understand, and this is what Paul talks about in Romans, I'll read it to you, Romans chapter 4, verses 9 through 13. Is this blessedness only for the circumcised or also for the uncircumcised? We've been saying that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. Under what circumstance was it credited? Was it after he was circumcised or before? It was not after, but before. And he received circumcision as a sign, a seal of the righteousness that he had by faith while he was still uncircumcised. What did Paul just explain to us in that moment? If you remember, it was Genesis 12 where God made a promise to Abram. And it said that Abram believed God, and God credited that to him as righteousness. Circumcision is not given as a covenant until Genesis 17. That's 5 chapters later. The point Paul's making is circumcision was a covenant, was a sign as a reminder of what God had already approved 5 chapters earlier. The sign is not what makes one righteous. But the righteousness can be given a sign to be remembrance. This ring that I wear on my finger from my beloved wife who's sitting right there scratching our daughter's back. I didn't buy this ring. I wear it, but I didn't buy it. I didn't put it on my finger. She put it on my finger. This isn't a sign of how awesome I am. This isn't even a sign to my wife of a promise that I've made to her. This ring is a sign of a promise she made to me. She gave this to me and said, I promise to be faithful to you and to live with you, sickness and in health, goofiness and in semi-goofiness, right? That's the only two models I have. She put that on my finger. This sign is talking about her faithfulness to me, just as the ring that I put on her finger is a sign of my promised faithfulness to her. God gives us signs to confirm relationship, but he's the one that does it. It's not saying, Abraham, you're so amazing, you can't get anything wrong. No. God's saying, I'm going to be faithful to my part of the promise, and I want you to be reminded of it. I'm giving you a sign that you'll constantly be reminded of it. This is the faithfulness of our God. Circumcision as a basis for justification before God is insufficient. Just because someone was circumcised, we would say in the Jewish tradition that doesn't mean they're right before God any more than if you've been baptized or you speak in tongues or your pawpaw is a pastor of a church. What other signs we look to that should say I'm in right standing? No, those are great signs, but the quality of my relationship with the Lord is about my heart and how I treat what he has to say. So circumcision as a basis for justification before God is insufficient. Circumcision as a basis for identifying with God's covenant promise to Abraham and the generations to come is completely sufficient. God affirms righteousness with a sign, but he doesn't affirm a sign as righteousness. If you have an Amazon gift card, it is valuable. But if you take it and try to use it at Walmart, it has no value there. Still valuable. It's just not for that purpose. In the same way, seals and signs, be they baptism, be they circumcision, be they confirmations or ordinations or plaques on the wall, those are great things. Those are great signs. But that's not equal to righteousness. The mark of righteousness is us believing when God says it, he does it, and it's done before it's done. And I'm going to live in that tension. And it is tension. Don't judge yourself because you struggle in that place of receiving the promise and waiting for it to flesh out. Don't judge yourself for that. We're human. It's hard. But it's in that place that we see our righteousness expressed as we put faith in the one who makes us righteous. Here's the last scripture. So Paul says in Romans 2:25, circumcision has value if you observe the law, but if you break the law, you've become as though you've not been circumcised. So then, if those who are not circumcised keep the law's requirements, will they not be regarded as though they were circumcised? The one who is not physically and yet obeys the law will condemn you, even though you have the written code or the sign, you're the lawbreaker. A person is not a Jew who is one only outwardly, nor circumcision merely outward and physical. No, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a person's praise is not from other people, but from God. What advantage then is there in being a Jew, or what value is there in circumcision? Much in every way. First of all, the Jews have been entrusted with the very words of God. Paul's reminding the early church, the Jewish believers, just because the sign doesn't prove your righteousness doesn't mean it's worthless. Like that Amazon gift card, it has value, just not value to accomplish this thing that you're trying to do. So don't throw it away and say it's worthless. Just don't put your trust in it for something it's not designed to be. Our righteousness before God is never going to be sealed by acts. It's going to be sealed by our heart's disposition towards him. Righteousness, faith, joy in the Holy Spirit, all by God's grace. So I think the ultimate wisdom we can get from Genesis 17, being marked by righteousness, is what we're reminded of in Proverbs 3. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make your path straight. It's done before it's done. Let's put our hope in him. Abram received a new name and the promise that he had already been made the father of many nations before Isaac was born. The promise is there for us to apprehend. We want to be marked by righteousness. We've got to trust that our church attendance or our small group involvement or how much we read the Bible, all of those signs are beautiful. They're beautiful. They have their own purpose in place. But they do not bear the condition of the heart. And when Abram looked at God, he trusted what he had to say, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Let me encourage you, in whatever you're facing and whatever you're dealing with, trust the Lord, not your own understanding. Don't believe the evidence that the enemy tries to put in front of you that says, don't believe, don't believe, don't believe. Trust the Lord. Both my parents right now, they live in Middle Tennessee. Both my parents have cancer right now. My mom, stage 4 liver cancer. My dad is prostate cancer. And they're doing well. Talk to them all the time. Their energy's good. The evidence is paraded in front of me all the time. So I've got to choose if I'm going to hold to hope. I get to make that choice. And you know what? Some days I do really great, and some days I really struggle. But if I must stumble, I want to stumble uphill and not down the hill. Does that make sense at all? It's not a sin to fight and struggle in your faith. God can use a failure. He just can't use a quitter. So in the promise, as God gives us those promises, as scared as we are sometimes to lay hold of them, don't judge yourself for being a little bit afraid, but don't quit either. Let's keep struggling towards, and let's see God bring about what's in His heart. And when He does it, every time you look at that guitar, every time you look at that thing you thought was impossible, it's a reminder, just like the seal, the covenant that God gave to Abram and to the children of Israel. It's a reminder, you know what? It was impossible. There's no way except that He did it.